Captain's Pick, the FPL Podcast. Hello and welcome on board flight episode 32 of Captain's Pick, the FPL Podcast. This is your captain and host speaking, Geoff at Willis, and each week I'll be taking flight to talk Fantasy Premier League football. You can find the show on a whole host of podcast services. Just search Captain's Pick. Please leave a review, like, share and subscribe. On today's show, I'll give a quick review of my Game Week 34, discuss my bench boost squad, transfers and my captain's pick for double Game Week 35. But first as ever, a quick shout out to the half-season Community League, which started scoring back in Game Week 20 and was set up to raise money and awareness for Cancer Research UK. And it's become even tighter now in the top 10. There's only 42 points now covering the top 10 in the league. The top 4 remains the same. So in 4th place, Mark Downey got 49 points this week and is on 922. Then Carl Gall in 3rd place with 50 points this game week on 924. In 2nd place, we have Shanojan Jagathisawan with a score of 51 this game week and is on 930. And top again for 2 weeks running now is Tom Dunn Massey, who got 48 points and is on 935. So just 13 points in that top 4. So incredibly tight. Definitely going to be someone in that top 10, I think, is going to win it with only 4 game weeks left to go. Definitely very tight up there, and anyone's league, I would say, at this stage. Okay, so looking back then on my Game Week 34, I obviously wildcarded last game week, and it was sort of 95% exactly how I wanted it to go and planned. Just made one sort of crucial mistake, and it was the one that I was umming and ahhing about all week. I'm sure if you listened to the podcast last week, Ryan Fraser was my big headache. He was in, he was out, he was in, he was out. And at the sort of right at the death, I made my mind up to transfer him out. And obviously he went on to score 16 points. And that was a real killer for me, to be honest. So I ended the game week on 54 points, which was the game week average. I wasn't too disappointed with that. If you add on the 16 points from a Fraser, would have been 70, and that would have been perfect. I had other players come in and didn't do that great. I left some players in who again didn't do that great, but Fraser was really the one that I was struggling with all week, and that was just a massive disappointment. But there we go. So overall points now 1,935. I actually dropped about 7k, so 244k is my overall rank at the moment. I was hoping that we'd go up on my wild card, but this was a squad picked mostly for the rest of the season now, for the next 4 or 5 games. So it's not always going to be the big boost in the first game week, but it's always nice if it could have been. And obviously if I'd kept Fraser, then I definitely would have seen a jump in my overall rank. Probably would have maybe got me to about the 200k. So going through my squad, brought in Gunn, the Southampton keeper, got me 2 points. Again, he's there for the rest of the season and for next week's double game week. Robertson, clean sheet against Chelsea, and as I said on the podcast last week, as a Chelsea supporter, I didn't really fancy Chelsea's chances too much. Was hoping maybe we could get maybe a 0-0 draw. Didn't think we'd win. But as I say, we lost 2-0. Robinson got his clean sheet. Chelsea did have a couple of chances when it was 2-0. Hazard should have scored 2 goals. Could have definitely been 2-2. But there we go. So clean sheet from him. I got a 0 from Doherty, who Wolves lost 3-1 to Southampton, and he was hauled off at 59 minutes as well. So he was on a big fat 0. So if I'd kept Fraser, maybe I could have benched Doherty, but these things happen. And my double Brighton defence for the double game week obviously ended in a bit of a disaster, with Brighton conceding 7 goals over the 2 matches, 1 point apiece for Duffy and Dunk. At least I didn't captain either of them. But that's just the way it goes sometimes in FPL. The stats are pretty much there defensive-wise at home. Just 2 awful games. But they've got another double game week coming up against harder opposition, admittedly. But maybe that's when they get their clean sheets. I doubt it, but there we are. Ericsson, brought him into my wild card, got me an assist, 6 points. Probably just as I said last week, was a 1 week punt. Probably going to transfer him out this game week for another City player or a Liverpool player. Son, who was unfortunately benched, came on for the last few minutes, managed to get an assist, luckily, as he was my captain. So he got me 8 points. And De Bruyne brought back 11 points. I was really happy with that. He was one of my early picks. Happy to have brought him in my wild card, and I would have thought he'd potentially stay in this side for the rest of the season now. Vardy, I'm denied a little bit over him. There was a lot of money wrapped up in him. It was him or Jimenez at one stage. Decided to leave him in the side because he had been in good form, but only returned the 2 points in a 1-0 loss at home to Newcastle, so that was disappointing. Brought in Aguero, again it was going to be Kane. It would have been a captain Kane. I'm sure he would have scored probably 4 or 5 the way that match went. But Aguero played 74 minutes, didn't score any. Obviously De Bruyne and Sterling getting the points in that game. But Wilson, thankfully, I left him in. Imagine if I'd got rid of Fraser and Wilson. He brought in 3 bonus points, 2 assists and a goal, so a 15-point haul from him. And yeah, just imagine what Fraser could have done. Could have brought him in, or left him in, and left one of the Brighton players out, Doherty out, and could have not brought in Ward-Prowse or Deulofeu, who were both on my bench, so that was disappointing. You can clearly hear that that's rankled with me all week, and I definitely think going forward and learning from things this season, playing FPL in the more kind of serious way, certainly in terms of doing the podcast this year and listening to other podcasts and watching lots of YouTube creators' videos and such, that if you're going to and ah over a player who's already in your side for however long that was, probably best just to leave him in, because it's going to kill you mentally more if he returns and you take him out. Yes, sometimes you and ah about bringing players in, but I always think the fact that you've already got that player makes it a lot more worse, because you could have brought in any other players, but the fact that you transfer them out, it really does hurt. And obviously Bournemouth have Fulham at home next, so that again could be a bit of a cricket score. Again, that's why I kept Wilson in, because I did think they would do something in these 2 games, but I was hoping it was not Fraser and more Wilson, but there we are. So 54 points from game week 34, and but this was a setup really for the next 4 or 5 games until the end of the season. So and very much focused on game week 35, double game week. So that's where I'll go to next. So the deadline, recording this Friday night, wanted to wait for all the press conferences to come in and see if there was any last minute injury news or anything like that. So the deadline is tomorrow, Saturday, at 11:30 in the morning. I'll remind you again at the end of the pod. So my squad's shaping up then for game week 35. There are double game weeks, and I currently have 13 players who all have double game weeks, and I am playing my bench boost. So the only two single game week players are Robertson, Cardiff away, and Wilson, Bournemouth, who have got Fulham at home. So this is how my squad is shaping up. So I've got as my two goalkeepers, Gunn from Southampton. They've got Newcastle away and Watford away. And Foster of Watford, who've got Huddersfield away, Southampton at home. Can definitely see clean sheets coming from both my keepers there. Be fantastic to get 4 clean sheets, but you just never know with the bench boost in these double game weeks. But the good thing about goalkeepers, they very rarely get rotated, even if there's 2 games in a short space of time. So I fancy to both them to play in both games and hopefully clean sheets. My back 5 then, because I am playing the bench boost, is all my 5 defenders will be playing. So Robertson, Liverpool, Cardiff away. Don't think it's going to be an easy game, even though Cardiff are right down there in the relegation zone. But with that win against Brighton midweek, that definitely would have buoyed them up. And going away to Cardiff isn't an easy game. I know Chelsea went there a couple of weeks ago, just got over the line against them. Cardiff will be really up for it. Liverpool played midweek Champions League away at Napoli, so that could play into it. But I'd hope for a clean sheet there, but definitely wouldn't be guaranteed from Robertson. But could well, if Liverpool do go big, which it could happen. Cardiff are down there for a reason. He could definitely be getting some assist points from that match also. So Doherty from Wolves, they've got Brighton at home, Arsenal at home, so 2 decent home fixtures. Yes, it's Arsenal, but they're not the best away from home. They concede pretty much in every game. Brighton obviously have just had 2 horrendous matches, so could definitely see points from him. With this their only competition they're in now, they could still get a Europa League place if they finish 7th. So I expect Wolves to be gunning for it. So expect points from him. And next up, Duffy again. Brighton awful, but they've got Wolves away, Tottenham away. Not expecting a whole deal, to be honest, from him or Dunk, who I still have in the team. Maybe might get a goal from one of those, potentially. Maybe 1 clean sheet, but not convinced. But there we go. Took the gamble for the double game week last week and didn't pay off, but maybe they get their points in this game week. And my last defender is Bednarek of Southampton. So it's a double up on Southampton and a double up on Brighton for the bench boost. So more than Brighton, I'm definitely expecting points from Southampton and hopefully clean sheets. Newcastle away, not known for loads of goals. Newcastle. Watford away, yeah, might not keep a clean sheet there, but I think Watford with Deeney suspended, that'll be a big miss for them, and they'll have half an eye on the FA Cup final also. So my midfield 5, I have James Ward-Prowse, Southampton, Newcastle away, Watford away. Could definitely get assist points or even a goal from a set piece in those matches. Could definitely see that. Those matches could be tight, so a set piece could settle it in those games. Deulofeu, he is yellow flagged as he was last week. He's trained for the last 2 weeks, so I'm hoping he sees some game time, especially with Deeney now out because of his suspension. He has played as a false nine before when Deeney's been out. So Huddersfield away, Southampton at home. Huddersfield away, hopefully he plays in that match because he definitely could put them to the sword. Then we have De Bruyne. City have got Spurs at home, Man United away. You would have thought difficult fixtures, but having lost to Spurs on aggregate in the Champions League midweek, they'll be fired up. And it's only been a few days rest, but it's the same for Spurs as well. I expect City could do some damage to Spurs in that game. They'll be wounded and they'll be looking for a response. And Man United away, historically it'd be a tricky fixture, but United haven't been great defensively recently. They obviously went out smashed by Barcelona in the Champions League, so they'll be a little bit down, but they've still got top four to play for. City obviously now will be going for the league big style, I expect points from De Bruyne. City away, Brighton at home. He could get rested or rotated in one of these matches, but I figure he'll probably definitely play against City. And the fact that he's suspended for the first leg of the Champions League probably means he would play against Brighton at home, and we've seen what Brighton are like, so could see a lot of points coming from Son. The vice captaincy is currently on him at the moment. Now my last midfielder is Eriksen, and he's the transfer that I'd sort of pre-planned last game week, and I think I mentioned then that I'd like to bring in a Liverpool midfielder, maybe Mane or Salah. I've got the money to do either. But I'm now thinking maybe the fact that City have gone out of the Champions League, that Sterling might be the one to bring in because he's been banging in the goals. I feel like he's going to have to play in both matches. And without the Champions League semi-finals now to worry about, I could definitely see him playing both games. So, although, again, as I said earlier, Cardiff away, I fancy Cardiff to play well. I still probably think Liverpool will win that, but I don't think it will be a cricket score. So, and Sterling would have 2 games instead of maybe a Salah 1 game. I do potentially want to bring in Salah the week after, or Mane for game week 36, as Liverpool are at home to Huddersfield. So I potentially triple captain one of them then. But of course, one of them might get injured. So it does delay it 1 game, which quite like that strategy. So at the moment, I'm leaning towards bringing Sterling in for Eriksen. And up front, my 3 there. Wilson, at home to Fulham. Fancy him doing really well against them. Aguero, as said, Tottenham home, Man United away. I think he could get some goals here. He could do some damage. He scored hat-tricks against Arsenal and Chelsea at home this season, so he can score against anyone. And the captaincy is currently on him. If I brought Sterling in, I'd maybe give Sterling the captaincy, but currently it's on Aguero. And I've made a transfer already, so out went Vardy. It was always pretty much the plan, and I brought in Jimenez for his Wolves double game week. Brighton at home, Arsenal at home. Could definitely see him scoring goals there. He'd be an outside candidate for the captaincy, I would say, but it's probably going to go to one of the City players. Obviously, I only had 1 free transfer this game week, so if I bring in Sterling alongside, obviously brought in Jimenez, that would be a -4. But if both players play both games 60 minutes at least, then I'll get the 2 appearance points in both games, so that'll cover the -4. So I'm not too worried about taking the hit, because I'll have two bites at the cherry of getting those 4 points back just in appearance points. So that's my game week 35 bench boost double game week squad. Just that 1 transfer to make, and it say, looks like Sterling to come in for Eriksen. I think Eriksen might get rested in one of those games. He'll definitely be playing the first leg of the Champions League semi-finals, so he potentially plays against City and maybe is rested at home to Brighton. That could be something there. So, and apart from that, it's just the yellow flag on Deulofeu. But I think I'm gonna go and risk it. They've got decent fixtures. I want an attacking Watford player, certainly in that Huddersfield away match, and with Deeney out. I think even a yellow flagged Deulofeu is probably still the best option. So that's my game week 35 squad. And I think that's where I'm going to land the show. A reminder that the game week 35 deadline is Saturday at 11:30am. That's tomorrow 11:30, or if you listen this Saturday morning, make sure you get your transfers done by 11:30am. Feel free to send in any questions or topics you'd like discussed on the show to either the podcast Twitter account at captainspickpod or the podcast email address captainspickpod@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening to this in-flight podcast. I've been your captain. Good luck with game week 35, and until next time, it's been my pleasure to talk with you.
Captain's Pick, the FPL Podcast.